Welcome to the Vantage Fit Corporate Wellness Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Fit, the all-in-one AI-powered corporate wellness platform developed by Vantage Circle.
What exactly is emotional wellness? The ability to deal with obstacles and change is often referred to as emotional awareness, understanding, and acceptance. It's also important for our emotional well-being to be in the present moment. The emotional wellness for adults is critical to living a happier and healthier life. In fact, it can assist older people in quickly recovering from setbacks. They can also hold on to happy emotions for longer and appreciate the good times. So let us discuss more on this topic of emotional wellness in today's Vantage Fit podcast episode. I'm your host, Dipshu Bhattacharjee, and today I have with me Ben Eden. Ben Eden has presented around the world with a message that raises listeners' sights and encourages them to reach their ultimate potential. He has a unique way of communicating with words that will capture attention and inspire our mindset. With real-life examples and entertaining stories, Ben helps audiences master their thoughts, heal their emotions, and live their dreams so they can achieve their best in both business and in life. From being an HR executive with nearly 2,000 employees to starting multiple businesses, Ben will help you live your dreams now as you reach for your ultimate potential. So, welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So please tell us your experience as a mental wellness enthusiast.
Sure. It really began when me and my family discovered that my sister was dealing with some emotional and mental struggles. We had no idea because on the surface, she seemed like the greatest, happiest girl there was. But after a time, we noticed that she was very depressed. She started to hurt herself. And then she actually needed to get into a facility to make sure that she stayed safe. This was such a surprise to all of us, where on the surface she was great, but underneath she was suffering in silence. So that was huge for me to see, but it also gave me the courage and opportunity to deal with my own. Because same or similar to her, on the surface, oh, sure, it looked like my life was great. In fact, a lot of my friends and associates said, Ben, you have a picture-perfect life. I was an executive in the HR realm. I had the nice car, the nice house. I had the education. I had all sorts of great things to make me look great. But I was suffering in silence as well. I had some unresolved emotions, and I was turning to behaviors that I really didn't like. I hated the behaviors. I hated that I turned to the behaviors, and I started hating myself because of that. More specifically, what I discovered about all these unresolved emotions was something that happened to me when I was a 9 or 10-year-old boy that I had really forgotten about, or I didn't realize how much it had affected me. So when I was in elementary school, we had just finished the greatest dodgeball game of my 9-year-old career. And I was just feeling great. I was on top of the world, doing great at this dodgeball game and helping my team win. And I was looking around and I would see that my friends were cheering me on, saying, yes, Ben, great job. We're going to win this game. And so I was feeling great. And as a 9 or 10-year-old boy, I was finally feeling like I felt accepted and I felt like I belonged. This was an important moment for me where I was feeling good and it was affecting my identity in a positive way. And after this, I sought out my group of closest friends and I wanted to celebrate with them and say, hey, wasn't that such a great dodgeball game? Don't you just love how much fun we have together? Isn't life just amazing? And as I went to find them, I saw that they were laughing hysterically about something. So I asked them, hey guys, what's so funny? And they turned to me and they said, raise your arms. And I was like, what in the world? Why would you tell me to raise my arms? We just had a great dodgeball game. We're having a good time. I want to celebrate. And you're telling me to raise my arms. Whatever. I didn't want to feel stupid. So I did. I raised my arms and they laughed even harder. I'm like, what? I'm so confused. And as I looked down to discover why in the world they were laughing, I realized that I had extremely sweaty armpits. And you might think, okay, after a dodgeball game, sure, you'd be sweaty. It's natural. But here I was, a 9 or 10-year-old boy, not fully understanding how the body works, not knowing how much you sweat, how normal it is to sweat, when you sweat. And I had gone from these feelings of elation and feeling so good and feeling like I belonged, all of a sudden to feeling humiliated, embarrassed, and now ashamed because my friends were laughing at me about something that I didn't control, I didn't understand. It obviously made me different, And I hated how that felt. I couldn't talk to anybody in the moment because, hey, those are my closest friends. And if I can't talk to them, who can I talk to? I didn't want to talk to my mom later in the day because I didn't want to bring it up. So I decided I would never feel that way again. And I pushed all those emotions to the back of my mind, again, saying I will never feel that way again. So then I lived with all this emotional pain or these unresolved emotions for 20 years, a long time. This was through high school, through service opportunities, through college, through an executive position. And I lived with this pain, suffering in silence. So why am I a mental wellness enthusiast? Because I've experienced the pain of suffering in silence. I've seen it with my sister, but at the same time, I've seen the joy and the completely different life that comes when we get the help that we need and we can resolve those emotions and know that we are not broken and we're not the problem.
Yeah. Even I believe like when you have someone whom you can confide in, I think that really helps in certain ways, right?
Yes.
Don't you think?
Absolutely.
Like, for example, if you had someone like since childhood, if you could actually confide in that person that, yeah, this happened and you went through like this. So maybe it would have helped a little.
100%. In many ways, just being able to have somebody to talk to in a safe environment can either completely avoid this 20 years of emotional pain or at least lessen it a lot so we don't feel alone and we don't feel broken and we don't start to think that there's something wrong with us. So you're totally right in that. But I also think there's so many people in this world that just suffer in silence. They think, I can't tell anybody. I'm the only one that feels this way. If I did tell somebody, then I would be embarrassed. They'd laugh. They wouldn't understand. And so internally, we fight this battle. And if we're fighting with ourselves because we're in our head, then we just exhaust ourselves and it gets worse and worse. So to your point, yes, that's absolutely the solution. And I also admit that it can be hard. So I just encourage anybody who's listening who is suffering in silence and you say, yeah, I understand that I should tell somebody, but I don't know if I can. Give it a shot. Find somebody safe, and that'll make all the difference.
Yeah. So, like you said, like mental wellness is like about dealing with emotions, right? We hide a lot of emotions. We don't express it. So, what is emotional wellness? Is it the same thing as mental wellness, or is it something different?
That's a great question. And I think that these two things, they can be confusing or confuse some people simply because of the way we use it in conversations. So mental wellness, by definition, can include our thinking, our feeling, our connecting, and our functioning. So it can include a lot of things. But I think in a majority of times, how people generally use the term mental wellness, it almost has a wrong connotation, like a stigma to it. Oh, if you have mental health, then there must be something wrong with you. You must have a diagnosis. You must be broken. You must be going to see a therapist. We see it in a negative light. But mental wellness, if we look at it in the proper way that, hey, it's normal, everybody has mental wellness or needs mental wellness because we all have mental health. We all think, we all feel, we all need to connect, we all need to function. Then we can break the stigma and say, all right, it's normal. Let's talk about it. Everybody has it, so we're okay. Now, emotional wellness, that is an aspect of mental wellness, but it's more specific. And I really focus on the emotional wellness, especially because that is something that we all relate on. We may not think the same. We may not connect in the same way. We may function differently, but how we feel, we can definitely relate. When we felt sad, when we felt happy, when we felt angry or scared, or connected or peace, we can feel those emotions and we can relate on those things. So that's why I specify so much on the emotional wellness.
Okay. So, even here, like when someone talks about mental health, so one like assumes that something is wrong with that person, like in the head. So mental health and wellness like is a like misunderstood concept, I feel. Like, don't you think like people just think that you are mad at some point of time. Like if you say that I'm dealing with some mental health issues, so people just assume that you've gone mad or something like that.
Yes, unfortunately, I believe there is that large stigma out there, which is why so many people feel like they can't talk about it.
Okay, so talking about emotional wellness, so can you elaborate on the characteristics of emotional wellness?
Absolutely. So if we were to turn that into a different question for ourselves and say, what does it mean? Am I emotionally well? The characteristics of it are that you treat others well, you like who you are, you're flexible, you hold gratitude for loved ones, you're in touch with your emotions, you have meaning in your life, and you value experiences more than possessions. So in essence, and this might be skipping to something else that we might talk about, but emotional wellness, if we feel our emotions, we're okay with ourselves, and that allows us to have strong and valuable connections with other people.
Okay, so like you mentioned the characteristics. So if we see such like traits in an individual, can we find out that like if that person is emotionally well or not? Can we determine?
If we look at somebody else, can we determine that?
Yeah, for example, the traits you just mentioned, like feeling of gratitude. If we see all these traits in a person, can we say for sure that that person is emotionally well?
That's a great question. I don't know if we should put ourselves in a place that we judge like that, right? If we say, oh yeah, that person's emotionally well, that's fine. Because specifically with my sister, oh my goodness, she seemed like she had all these things down, right? She treated others really well. She seemed to like who she was. She held gratitude for loved ones. So when we see it in others, it doesn't guarantee that they're emotionally well. These are characteristics, meaning if you have them, okay, it's a good sign, but it doesn't guarantee it.
Yeah. So basically, like from the third person view, like if we see some person and that person is acting all well and good, doesn't mean that deep inside the person is well, right?
Right. So, even speaking from my own experience, it seemed like I had life all put together. But that wasn't always the case.
Yeah. Okay. Understood. So, like talking about emotional wellness, is it related to mindfulness and emotional intelligence?
Yes. And here's how I see the difference. And first of all, I just want to say one more thing about our previous question, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Go on.
Because I think, well, why would we want to look at somebody else and determine if they're emotionally well? Well, possibly to help ourselves and say, well, if they are well, what are they doing so that I can be well? But really, we will only ever fully understand our own story. We'll never fully understand what somebody else is going through. So to judge and say, okay, they're fine, therefore I don't need to help or I need to treat them a different way, I don't think that's very fair or helpful. But for ourselves, we can say, hey, if I want to be emotionally well, then let me ask myself these questions. Do I treat others well? Do I like who I am? Am I flexible? And you go through these questions. And if you can say to yourself that you have strong relationships, and here's what I learned myself. I knew a lot of people. I had a lot of connections. But did I have a lot of strong relationships? No. Most of my relationships were superficial. We knew each other by name. Maybe we were in the same choir or leadership group or something. But deep relationship, no, because I was trying to protect myself to not get hurt. And that's a sign of not being emotionally well. So ask yourself that question and be honest with yourself. That's where it really comes into play. A lot of us say, oh, I'm fine. Oh, it's not that bad. Oh, it's not as bad as somebody else. But that's not being honest with ourselves. If we feel our emotions, say, yeah, I'm sad today, and that's okay. Oh my goodness, I'm angry today. And that's okay. Let me understand it so I can release that energy in a positive way. And that's okay. It's when we judge our emotions, saying, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, or I can't believe I feel this way, and we're not honest with ourselves, that hurts our emotional wellness. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, so like it seems a lot difficult sometimes to like accept our own emotions and feelings. Like we are like, no, we are not. I'm not feeling that way. I'm all fine. I'm all fine. I'm doing okay. But deep inside, like we're not. But then like accepting that thing is itself a difficult task, right?
True. And to what we talked about earlier, that's why it's so important to have somebody safe with whom you can talk about these kinds of things. Because we live so much inside of our own head that sometimes we can bring ourselves down because we say things and then we say, oh yeah, that's totally true. And here's how I justify it. And this is why I feel this way. And this is why I'm so terrible of a person and yada, yada, yada. But if we can say it to somebody safe who doesn't judge, just listens, then as you say it out loud to somebody, then you can see it in a better light. And you say, well, that doesn't make sense. It definitely can't be true that I'm a terrible person. Yes, I feel this way, but now I see it as a feeling and emotion, not something that defines me.
Yeah, I think these days it's very difficult to find such a person who actually will not judge you, right? So many of us just like keep our emotions within ourselves and do not express. Yeah.
And
so
one more thing on that subject.
Yeah.
There's something, I've learned a lot of cool things these last year and a half where I've done this full time. So I could share all sorts of things. But it's very interesting that when we don't control our own emotions, we try to control somebody else's behavior. And a lot of times that can be why it's hard to find somebody who will listen without judging, because they're dealing with their own emotions. And it's not to say they're a bad person or, oh my goodness, they're not good enough. It's just to realize, hey, we're all human. We all have emotions. So let's all learn together on how to help one another, starting with ourselves. And so, yes, there are the coaches and the therapists and people who are more trained in dealing with their own emotions so that they can be present and keep it safe for you. And so, it's all our quest, as it were, to find somebody that we trust and have those conversations.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, let's talk about workplace wellness. So how much significance does emotional wellness hold in the workplace?
This is a great question. I would say, especially from my experience as an HR executive, that this can be an invisible plague, if we're going to put it in extreme terms, because it's always there, this emotional wellness or lack thereof, right? Now, we have our workers' compensation for physical illness or physical injuries. But what do we have for emotional and mental illness or injuries or lack of wellness, right? Yeah. Majority of the time we say, leave it at home. It doesn't belong here. Really? When somebody spends a majority of their waking hours at work, how can they leave a huge part of them at home? That's not realistic. Yeah. Even the leader asking them to do that can't do that for themselves. So think of it this way. All right, we're all human. We all have emotions. It's unrealistic to just say, leave it at home. That's like saying, hey, while you're at work, you have no family, you have no friends, you have no life. You just work here. That's not the way of life today, especially. Yeah. So the significance that emotional wellness holds in the workplace, it's almost everything. Because when somebody is not emotionally well, they will be distracted. They won't be able to bring their full self to work. They may even be present, but not there, meaning presenteeism. Sure, their butt's in the chair, but their brain's not there. Or they might experience absenteeism, where, my goodness, this person's never at work. They're always sick. They're always having something to do, yada, yada, yada. And that just adds to the stress. And what, unfortunately, a lot of leaders turn to is say, I have to get work done. This person's not getting work done. Therefore, I have to replace them. Yeah. And it turns into this cycle of nothing getting fixed. But if we look at it a better way and say, what would happen if my employees had emotional wellness? Can you imagine the productivity they would have when they bring their full selves to work, their full creativity, their full ability, their full passion? Imagine the innovative ideas that they'd bring to work and the problems that they would solve and the customer service that they could give. Everything would be amazing. And what does that require? That requires that we make it safe for people to be human. We listen and we educate. So to your point, where so many people suffer in silence, but who in the world are we going to talk to or tell? It doesn't mean that we have to go to work and we have to share all our deepest, darkest secrets, or we have to cry, or this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
I'm not saying crying is bad, but I know that sometimes people are like, wow, I don't know what to do if somebody's crying in front of me. But we have to keep ourselves separate and realize, hey, I have a person in front of me, they're experiencing an emotion, and it doesn't, we need to separate our identity from it. We don't just think, oh, shoot, why did I make them cry? Or what did I do to make them cry? Realize, hey, they're experiencing something. Let them experience it by listening, giving them safe space. And a majority of the time, after they experience that emotion, then that emotional energy is gone. And now the person's ready to say, okay, I feel better and let's get back to it. That's the reality of life. But too often we try to skip that emotional experience. And what happens is it gets stuck. What we think is, oh, if I ignore it, it'll go away. But that's absolutely not true. It becomes a burden that everybody carries around. And then you wonder why all your employees are tired and burned out.
And I think it keeps piling on, right? The entire.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So even I believe that when, like, with the present day deadlines, like everyone is busy in some work or the other, the mental health gets unnoticed. Like people just do not give time to themselves. They just are busy with their office life, going to office, working, meeting the deadlines, like achieving goals. But then deep inside they might be suffering, and nobody, even they themselves, would not know about it, right?
True.
Yeah. So talking about that, what can the leaders do to ensure their employees are emotionally well?
So I kind of mentioned it already, but I'll mention it again just to make it clear. So I teach it in 3 ways, or 3 things to do. You listen, you educate, and you make it safe. So by listening is the only way, or at least the most effective way, to understand what the employee is truly going through. Otherwise, all we do is guess.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're going to be wrong, and then it doesn't help. So listening allows the employees to give their input, allows you to see what they're going through so that you can do what you should do as a leader and help them. Your job as a leader isn't just to tell them what to do. Your leader is to say, or as a leader, your job is to say, okay, here's the task that we get to do as a team. How can we do it best? And then you, as a leader, work to remove barriers. Some of these barriers can be the lack of emotional wellness. So if you listen to know what they're going through, great. And then to your point, where some people, they might just be so busy that they're not used to talking about emotions. Oh, I was there. I totally understand. So that's where the education part comes in. And if we can say something like, anger is often a secondary emotion, which means it hides either sadness, fear, or pain. And if somebody hears that for the first time, they say, oh my goodness, I never realized why I was so angry all the time. But now that I do, let me resolve the sadness, fear, or pain. And maybe I don't have to react in anger all the time. Maybe I don't have to yell at the customers. Maybe I don't have to yell at my employees. Maybe I don't have to be so mad at myself. So little bits of education like that can go a long way.
Yeah. And moreover, I believe like leaders are someone like employees look up to, right? So if they are like there to listen, to educate the employees will feel more relief, and they will feel more grateful for there would be someone to listen to their problems and everything. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You brought up a good subject where people look up to leaders naturally, right? And they watch what they do and they try to emulate.
Yeah.
So it's important for leaders to express, or at least show, that they experience emotions. If a leader is always perfect and always put together and always stone-faced, meaning doesn't show any emotion, then that's going to make the employees feel like, oh, I can't have emotions. I feel this way, but I shouldn't because my leader doesn't. And then we start to think, well, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? Nobody else seems to.
Yeah.
So when I can tell you, both from my own experience and hearing stories from other employees, it is so valuable. It almost sounds counterintuitive, but it's so valuable when a leader shares an emotion or shares a vulnerability with the employees. Now, for example, if my boss, the CEO, sits down with me one day and just admits that he's tired and that he doesn't have all the answers and he's really trying to figure it out. He loves the company, he loves the people, but he's just struggling to find an answer, then I don't see it as, oh my goodness, my boss has a problem, my boss is weak, now I don't have a leader, should I be worried for my job? No, I see it as, wow, this guy is trying really hard and he really cares about this company. And it makes me want to work even harder for this person because they were vulnerable.
Yeah.
And this definitely works in leadership as a whole.
Yeah. People are like more scared of the judgments. Like, even if they are going through a lot of things, they fear the judgment or the criticism coming from people.
It's true.
So that is why most of the people do not like express themselves on many occasions. Yeah. So like you mentioned that you were an HR professional once.
Yes.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So have you had any such experiences with any of your employees, like who were struggling with their mental health and like emotional wellness?
Oh, absolutely. So this would happen often, either from employees or managers. They'd come to my office and just, for lack of a better word, complain, or they'd vent. And I learned to see it instead of, man, this person is just complaining or just sharing problems, and now I need to fix them and fix their problems. I began to see it as, okay, they're letting their emotions out. And once they let their emotions out, then they're already smart enough and capable enough to fix the problem. They just needed a safe place to release those emotions. So one of the most common, besides my CEO, and it's natural, he's a CEO, he's in charge of the entire company. There's a lot of things that go on, and it's needed for him to let his emotions out. If he were to carry all of that, he'd go crazy. But another example is my call center manager. The call center generally gets a lot of complaints coming in because you hear all the feedback, the good and bad, and people have things to say. So the call center manager, who has to deal with all of those customers plus all the employees who have to deal with that and have to have the frustration and anger, he has a lot of stress on his plate. So often he would come into my office and just talk about things or talk through things. And you say, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what I'd love to do, but here's what I'm struggling with, yada, yada, yada. And I would just let him talk because he was talking things out, figuring things out as he went. And when he got his emotions out, awesome. Then we could talk in a logical or rational mindset and say, well, now let's find a solution for this. And it would work every time.
I think that's a really great solution, right?
Right.
Yeah. So like having someone like who understands that can do a great deal of that can actually help people. Like even in my case, so there was a time when I was struggling with a lot of issues. So I thought of going to a counselor and actually do something about it, like work on my mental health issues. But yes, so once I started talking to this person and he started listening to me, I felt a lot of relief and really great thing. So then I actually thought that there was a lot of burden. I was carrying a lot of things on my shoulders at the same time. So I should let myself be a little free.
Yeah. And let me ask you this. Did this counselor come to you and say, here's all the things you should do. Here are all the things that I think would fix your problems?
No.
Right.
Yeah. Listening, being listened to, I think is the best solution anyone could provide.
Right. So yeah, if an employer is looking for a program, quote unquote program, then the employer should first look and see how well they're listening.
Yeah.
That'll solve a majority of things. And then you don't have to spend tons of money and possibly waste a ton of money on recognition and prizes and this, that, and the other that may not work.
True. Okay. So it was great talking to you, Ben. So do you have something to share with our listeners?
Yes. So this knowledge that we've talked about today,
yeah.
If you're not familiar with it, yes, it can be a little intimidating simply because you still have the burden of all the emotions on you. You might still be in the suffering in silence phase, and you might think, oh, will it really work for me? Will somebody really listen, and will I be okay? I've been there. I had to get through that. But let me tell you, I tell this to everybody, and I tell it to you with conviction. Reaching out will help, because then you'll discover that you're not alone in what you feel. You might find somebody who's been through a very similar or same thing as you, and you say, oh my goodness, I didn't know. And that lifts a lot of burden off your shoulders. And your life completely changes when you know that you're not broken, that you're not the problem, and that there are people around you that care about you and can help you. So even today, in less than an hour, I'm doing a mental health in the workplace virtual workshop to kind of explain these kinds of things and to end the stigma and make it safe so that people can say, hey, let me talk, let me be okay, and then we can start to improve together. So I have a lot of resources for that, an online course that I've created, some other materials, even coaching packages. And if anybody's interested in that, then they can go to my website. It's reachyourultimatepotential.com. That's where all that information can be found. You can reach out to me directly. And I'd love to be a safe place where you can just share what you're going through, and we can help you begin your journey to healing.
Okay. So that's absolutely great. Thank you so much, Ben. It was great talking to you. I'm sure our listeners also get a lot of insight from this session. I hope you had a great time as well.
I sure did.
With this, we conclude today's session. Okay, thank you so much. Have a great day ahead.
Okay, you too. I'll see ya.
Thanks for listening to Vantage Fit Corporate Wellness Podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage Fit Corporate Wellness Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and our YouTube channel for new episodes.